I'm Mike Brilla, host of the Inspired Teacher Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Ninth Grade Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Dutchko. The goal of this podcast is to give you the story of ninth grade students here at Emmaus High School and beyond through the people who live it daily, the students and the staff. We attempt to touch on real issues and stories that ninth grade students face in order to prepare them to know that ninth grade counts. And we're happy to be back this week with a full episode. If you have been following along on TikTok, we are doing lots of cool stuff on TikTok related to games or events or things happening here at the school. So if you follow us at Ninth Grade Experience on TikTok, you'll get to see all the small content that we're producing. But we really, at the Ninth Grade Experience, like to produce these big full-length episodes. So today's is actually a really awesome one. And thanks to Zoe Gaumer, who is a ninth grade student here, for sharing her amazing story about mental health and clearing up misconceptions about student mental health and really being open and honest, sharing her story with us here on the podcast today about what she has gone through in the last couple of years and how she has really worked hard to move past some of her things that she was working on and that what her outlook and perspective on being a ninth grade student is like after going through all those things. So I hope that you listen to this full episode to get a real story of a ninth grade student struggling with mental health. It's one of those things that comes up all the time that students want to hear more about mental health. And maybe this story will allow others to know that they're not alone in their story. So, hopefully if you see Zoe in the hallway, reach out to her, or you can reach out to us here at the Ninth Grade Experience and we can reach out to her. But she's an amazing story, and thanks to her for sharing everything you're hearing today. So again, if you like prior episodes of the show, you can go to ninthgradeexperience.com. That's where all the episodes are, the audio, the video, and then obviously we are doing stuff on TikTok. So thanks to all of you for really making that go. As of the recording of this, we have 133,000 views on TikTok, which I never would have imagined. There's some goofy videos, but we're also going to start to put out clips of the episode and maybe previous episodes on there as well, too. So it's not just for the latest trends, but to give you lots of great information about previous ninth graders, current ninth graders, and maybe some other things going on in the school and beyond. So if you're listening to this and you're not at Emmaus High School, maybe you can learn about what it's like to be a ninth grader here. So again, ninthgradeexperience.com for all of the latest episodes and Ninth Grade Experience on TikTok. So thanks a lot for joining us today, and please enjoy and learn and listen to the story of Zoe Gaumer. We are trying to get in contact with more students who are willing to share their stories here. And we had somebody that was recommended by several of our staff members here in the building as somebody that A, wanted to come on and tell an interesting story, and B, has a lot to talk about. So we're here today with ninth grader Zoe Gaumer, who is going to talk to us about lots of different things going on in her ninth grade year. So Zoe, thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Glad to be here.
So it's not it's pretty rare that somebody reaches out to me and says, this is a good person to come on and talk on the podcast. So
yeah.
We had some recommendations from our school counselors and some other people that, like, you are doing lots of great stuff within the school and even at our middle schools. So I'm really excited to hear about all the things that you're doing to support mental health, and you're actually involved in some really cool stuff too, and extracurriculars as well. So we like to start off by whether it's a student or a staff member or an adult, asking them to talk about their ninth grade year. So here we are almost to the end of the first marking period.
Yes.
And how has your ninth grade year been going?
So honestly, I've always been super excited to go to high school. Like, ever since I was a little baby, just started walking. I've always just been super excited to have all the privileges and the freedom that you get when you go into high school, and, you watch all those high school movies and you're like, oh my God, that looks so fun and cool. When in reality, it's nothing like that. So that's one thing that I have, noticed since I started coming here, that, it's not like it is in the movies, and they portray it a lot better in the movies. And so I kind of had a rough experience with it so far, just because it didn't live up to my expectations, but those expectations weren't reality.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, especially with the different movies, and I'm not real up to date on all the different stuff, but I know there have been recent shows about like students going into high school, maybe like on Netflix and other stuff that are a little bit different than maybe the teen movies that, some older people that are listening might be more familiar with. So it's interesting that like, you have this impression of what ninth grade is going to be like. You got here, you're living it, and it's like, wow, this is not like it is in the movies. So how has it been, like, kind of, what hasn't it been like then?
I feel like there's not, like, the cliques that everyone, like, my parents would always talk about, that they'd be like, oh, like, there'll be cliques, and there'll be, like, the jocks and, like, the, like, cheerleaders, and I feel like you don't really see that as much, like, when you're walking through the halls. I feel like it's kind of more of a group, like, there's groups of people, but it's more of, like, swarms, and everyone's kind of going to different groups. So I feel like it's not just so like singled on a specific group. There's like plenty of groups, and it's not really those traditional cliques that they've had in like movies where it's like, the jocks and just the geeks and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think, and it's interesting you say that because I think this is my 14th year here, and I haven't seen that as much here at the high school either. Like, it's interesting, you have this impression that athletes only hang out with athletes, but I think a lot of times everyone's kind of so mixed. And a lot of people are involved in lots of different stuff as well, too. So they kind of have friends that span lots of different groups. And you are definitely somebody, in talking to you before we started, that is somebody that might span a lot of these different groups. And it's, a common theme on the podcast. We always talk about getting involved in lots of different stuff. So you're currently involved in a newer club here at the school called Aevidum, which we'll kind of talk about in a second here. And then you're also getting ready to potentially do the fitness club, which is awesome. If you've seen the people running, have you been practicing at all with them yet?
No, we haven't. We've met and we've had like little mini meetings, but we haven't started practices. So I haven't trained with them. I don't know them too well, but I'm aware of like who they are.
Yeah. So if you are at the high school and you're around after school on a random Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you see a large group of people running down the hallway at you, that's the fitness club. So that's, that's an awesome group to be a part of. And also, we'll come back to this later on too, but you are potentially going to wrestle on the wrestling team. You currently participate in jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
So it's a kind of a natural progression. So you were involved in lots of stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny because I work at 3 Men and a Bagel, which a lot of people I work with there are seniors. And so before I started going here, I would ask them, like, hey, what clubs are good? Like, what should I get involved in? And they kind of gave me some guidance on it. And a lot of them, I've been a dancer since I was 2. So a lot of them said the dance team and stuff like that. So I have a lot of options for clubs. I just need to, like, kind of think about what direction I want to go in with that and what I want my high school career to kind of look like.
Yeah, but you're definitely getting involved, which is awesome. One of the things here that we talk about early is getting involved, finding your people. And the reason that you were referred to me is the work that you're doing with our Aevidum club.
Yes.
And that's a new club here at the high school. So this is a great opportunity to hear about something new and to touch on a topic that when we've asked students in the past what are some things that they'd like to hear more about on the podcast, the topic of student mental health always kind of comes up.
Yeah.
And Aevidum is a club that focuses on that as well as other stuff too. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your involvement in Aevidum and what is that group? What do they do?
Yeah, so Aevidum is kind of a national group, so there's like a bigger corporation throughout the whole U.S., and then they go into and they have different groups in schools that kind of work with that district specifically. And so our Aevidum club just started, but we're trying to get involved and reach out to most of the students in the high school, and because we're new, it's hard to find ways to reach out to them, but we've been trying to go to football games. We have been doing some announcements and just trying to get people more aware of the club since it is new. But we do a lot of things, and not only focus on how to help other people's mental health, but we also focus on how to keep your mental health in a good place. So a lot of our meetings will do some little like group activities where we're working together and kind of figuring out how we can then help other kids in the school with what we learned that like meeting. And it's just all the kids in it are super nice, and I haven't had any bad experiences with it, and I think it's a really good club for people to have as a resource if they're struggling with any sort of mental health issue, or if they want to help people with mental health issues. I think it's a very good club to get involved in.
No, it's interesting, as in the last couple of years, obviously mental health has taken a new priority in kind of student discussion and things that have been going on. So it's interesting to now see that at the high school here we have a club that is kind of focused in on those types of things. So, having that opportunity to be able to share with other students in a safe space that's not necessarily in a quote counseling environment, I think is something that could be very intriguing for students to be able to use and access, after school when they have the meeting. So it's pretty neat for you to be able to be a part of that. And I know that you have an interest in sharing your own stories. You are also talking to middle school students with presentations, or you're trying to work on that as well too. Yeah. And one of the things that the people that recommended you said that you want to help to clear up some mental health myths for students in ninth grade and kind of dispel some of those things. So we talked before about sharing parts of your story, and you thought it was important to share some parts of your story in order to kind of let students know that some of the things that they're experiencing, they're not alone in experiencing. So, what have you been able to work through or overcome through some of the different supports and things?
Yeah, so obviously people get sad all the time. I used to be a very emotional person. I would, something little would happen and I'd cry about it, and kind of any emotion I had, I would resort to crying. And at one point, I was I felt so left out of everything else that I felt a need to kind of insert myself into other people's lives, and kind of that's how I thought I would make friends. So I started telling people that my parents were doing stuff that they weren't supposed to be doing. And at one point I was on FaceTime with my friend, and I called my dad up to help me with my math homework, and I was on the phone with my friend, and they were in my AirPods. So I was listening to them while listening to my dad explain me my math homework. And my dad kind of got frustrated because I kept laughing at what my friend on the phone was saying and not really paying attention to him trying to help me, and I called him up. So he just felt that was disrespectful. So he kind of just gave me a nudge, and he was like, hey, get off the phone, we're gonna work on this now. And my dad can be very intimidating. He was in the Marines, so he's just a very intimidating person. So to my friend, it looked really, it looked aggressive, and just he looked like he was overstepping. So my friend then starts texting me and putting these ideas in my head that what he was doing wasn't okay, and that a parent should have been doing that. So then I started to believe that on my own, and I started telling a bunch of people that my parents were doing these things. And eventually I just started to truly believe it myself, and it went down this really bad path where I had child services called on my parents multiple times. I ran away, and at one point my school actually sat down with me, and my principal was like, you need to go get a psych eval, you need to go to the hospital, and you need to we need to make sure you're okay, because this is ongoing and you're constantly having issues, and we just want to help you and we want to be there for you. So they called my parents picked me up, and we went to the ER, and I got admitted, and they did some tests. And while they were doing the test, I was kind of lying because it was a scary environment. I mean, I was in a room with a vault door and no windows, and it was just very intimidating, and I think that it scared me a lot. So I kind of started telling more lies to kind of be I don't want to be here, I'm not supposed to be here. Mm-hmm. And I think I started to realize that I was making all of it up, and I was I shouldn't be here, I'm going to lie. And eventually we went home, and that really ruined my relationship with my parents, because they were kind of hurt that I was even thinking some of this stuff about them, because at the time they had no idea what was going on. They knew nothing. They thought everything was fine. And then one day, there's people knocking on their door saying are you guys fit to be taking care of your daughter, and saying that I need to go get a psych eval, and they just knew nothing. So they were caught very off guard, and it just it was a really rough patch because we didn't really talk much. We were all kind of separated, and we just weren't connecting, and I wasn't telling them anything, and they just felt like they weren't involved in my life and they couldn't help me in any way. And then I ran away. This was after I got my psych eval. I ran away, got in a fight with my parents, ran away, and at that point, the person's house I ran away to, they called the cops, and the cops were over, and the cops were talking to my parents. And then we decided that I would stay with my aunt and uncle for the weekend just to kind of like clear things up and just kind of take a little break from each other. And so I was there for the weekend, and my parents came up one of the days, and they were like, what's the plan? Like, what are our next steps? What are we going to do to kind of fix this and move on? And at that point, I was dancing for 12 years, and they were like, we're going to pull you out of dance. And, like, it was the middle of competition season. They're like, you're not even going to finish. Like, we're pulling you out. You're done. They pulled me out of everything. I lost all communication with pretty much all my friends. Didn't have my phone for a while. Couldn't have social media anymore. And as a teenager, it was really rough to not have that stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like teenagers are very addicted to their phones and social media. And not only did I have social media, but I had like 30K followers on TikTok. So I was like pretty high up there, and I like finally was getting some like fame, I guess. And I think that just messed with my head even more. So when I got it taken away, it was definitely rough. And my dad would then put me through like a quote-unquote boot camp, because he, like I mentioned earlier, he was in the military. So we would go on like 4-mile walks every morning at 7 a.m. and we would work out for an hour after that. And then like we'd do all this stuff. We'd eat healthy. And after like 2 months, like I didn't really miss anything. I didn't miss my phone. I didn't miss social media. I didn't miss dance. Like all of it, I finally realized I could live without. And it like I was doing like great over the summer, and I came back to school, and in high school one of the good things is we can have our phones out.
Yeah.
So I got to school and I was like, oh cool, like we can have our phones out. And now I wasn't looking like forward to that much anymore because I didn't really have anything to do on my phone since I didn't have social media. And I would remember like sitting in class, and the teacher was like, oh, like you guys can have your 5-minute break now, like go on your phones, do whatever you want. And like everyone pulled out their phones and they were like on it, and no one was talking, and I was just sitting there like, are we just gonna sit here and like not talk, and like what's the deal? And then my one class would even create a group chat with everyone who was in the class and then text the group chat as we were in class.
Yeah, I can imagine that kind of stuff happens, and yeah, it's wild to think that like you have this opportunity to have people in front of you, and yet you don't really interact with them at all. And you had a chance to see like not having that, of what that actually means to be able to interact with people.
Yeah, and it was just sad because it's like can you at least stand up and come talk to me in person? Like, well, like we're actual humans. Like, it was just very heartbreaking to see, I guess. And the whole point of like my story was I went like, all of this happened within the span of like a half a year. Like, it didn't take long, and it was the build-up before that, like the bad decisions I made before that, that got me reported to Safe to Say multiple times. And like, just, I would try to fix things with something, and then it wouldn't work, and I'd move to something worse. And it eventually just got to the point where I was getting the cops called, and like, it just got really bad. And it took me to that moment to realize that I was making all this up and that I hurt people. And the people that I lied to when I was telling them all this stuff that, like, when I believed in, I was like, one of the things with healing was you need to go back and you need to apologize to these people and explain to them that this did not happen and it was a lie. And so I would go back to my friends and I would tell them that, like, hey, like, I'm sorry, like, I made this up, here's what happened. And I would tell them the whole story and how I didn't know I was lying and I was, like, not doing it on purpose. And I lost a lot of friends over that. I was pretty much left alone because everyone just considered me a liar. So I just kind of focused on myself for that period of time over the summer, didn't really talk to many people. but I loved it. I think everyone needs a little me time sometimes. I think it's really important.
Yeah, like you time, like not like involved in other stuff, but actually like thinking about yourself and like what you need to do. There's so much in the story that you told, and I'm really thankful that you were willing to share all that. It's just really interesting. And the part that you just said at the end was interesting. Like, it just happened so fast. Like, it seemed like you kind of had I'm going to use the air quotes, the typical teenage, I guess close to teenage experience. You were, you had friends, you were getting popular on social media. You were, you had all this air quotes influence. And then all of a sudden, like, you just kind of like started believing what other people were telling you. And then it kind of got so like convoluted and kind of mixed up that you just kind of went with it. It's just really, sharing that story just shows students like how quickly it can kind of change. And I'm sure you didn't set out like when you're starting in social media and like you kind of get all this different stuff, or you're with all your friends, to be like wanting it to happen, but it just kind of happened to you that fast.
Right. It like sneaks up on you and you don't even realize it's happening. Like, one second everything's fine between you and your family, and the next second, like, you guys are screaming at each other every day, you guys are getting in fights, you're running away. Like, it literally just like spiraled so quickly, and I didn't even know it was happening. And it's really scary to look back at, because the fact that I just couldn't even recognize that I was like losing myself and like making all this stuff up, and that I actually believed it, is just like crazy to think that our minds can do that to us and like trick us like that.
And you said that you had like the realization kind of at the point of like, I guess it would be too early in your life to say you hit like the rock bottom, but like when you kind of had that realization, like how did you feel? Like, I'm sure that like you had been kind of going through this story and these things that you've been telling yourself, and then all of a sudden, as a 13, 14-year-old, like getting ready to enter high school, you come to this realization that like for the last however many months, like I've been basically creating this weird lie for myself, and now I'm like have to totally reinvent yourself as a person, or come back to where you were before all this started. Yeah,
it felt absolutely horrible to step back and look at all of the people I hurt through that process, and just how many people I lost. Like, even like the connection with me and my parents just wasn't the same. Like, after the whole situation, we started doing family therapy and stuff, and like eventually we got back to normal, but it took a really long time, and I don't think that they're ever going to forget that happened. And I felt like a horrible daughter. Like, the fact that I did that to my own parents, I like was really hard on myself for, because it was just like, those people like gave you life. Like, how can you do that to someone who loves you so much? And I think, in a way, there's a lot of kids at school who might have friendships that look like a less extreme version of this, and I think to like really take a step back and be like, do these people really love me? Like, do they care about me, and should I be like interacting with them, or are they bad influence? And I went through that whole process thinking my parents were horrible influences on me, and they were doing a bad job and they shouldn't be parenting me. And I realized like they were the only ones that stuck through with me the whole time. And like I used to think like, oh, they have to stick with me, they're my parents, which they do, but they were really patient with me, and they lost it sometimes, but the fact that we were able to overcome it, and like now that we're in such a good place now, just like really brings joy to me, because I was so hurt that I hurt them, and now we're kind of past that, and now they, they're saying like, oh, like you're so much better now, like we're all happy and we're all doing this fun stuff, and like I'll be hanging out with my parents and we'll all be laughing and like, smiling and giggling, and I'll like take a step back in my brain and be like, look at where we've come, like we're so much better now, and like it's such a better relationship, and it feels so good to know that you have your parents there. And I wouldn't say that I have many friends here, I would say I have some acquaintances, but I think I realize that I don't need the followers, I don't need the friends, I don't need the popularity to kind of feel whole. I need my parents and my family to be there for me, and that's pretty much it. Like, you don't need all those extra people in your life.
And it is, talking about the message that you're going to potentially share with middle school students or even the people that are going to listen to this. That is a really strong message and, really wise beyond your 14. How old are you, 14?
I'm 14, yeah.
So beyond your 14. And it's like you were able to have this like huge life-changing moment. And thankfully, you're, able to come out on the other side. Like, nobody was like injured, like you didn't like have like any sort of like physical thing, but you're obviously dealing with all the mental parts of it. But like you've now had this chance to like recover, rebuild, and now you're able to like share the story. So like when you kind of want to share this with middle school students, obviously like you're sharing the story here, but like when you're going to talk to somebody that was basically you last year, like what kind of message would you like to share with them about all this?
I would honestly like to just tell them to like take a step back and like open their eyes and really think to themselves like what exactly am I doing? Am I making lies up? Am I telling the truth? Do I need to get help? Am I okay? Like, am I, just making all this up in my brain? Like, I think kids just really need to like separate from society for a little bit and kind of like, take some me time, like we said, and just kind of take care of yourself. And like I know there's a bunch of stuff on social media that's like, oh, self-care and all this fun stuff, but like I really think a cleanse from social media, a cleanse from friends, like I think all of that's very healthy. And I don't think if you have friends that you don't talk to and you're like, I need some time, and you're like, give me a couple days, and they get mad at you for that, I don't think that they are the right friend for you. I think that they should respect that you need space. And I think you need to figure yourself out before you can have friends or have a good relationship with really anyone. You need to have a good relationship with yourself. And you will get through it. It'll be hard. And I definitely went down some paths that some people wouldn't have been able to come back from. Because those paths, they're addictive. Some people just go down a spiral and they can never come back from that. And some people could even die. And I think you just really need to like take a step back and be like, what am I doing? Is this a wise choice? Should I be doing this? And just take care of yourself.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for you for a second here. But Zoe, I'm 14 years old. My whole life is in my phone. I am constantly on Snapchat. I am constantly on TikTok. All of my friends are there. We're communicating all of the time. How can I live without my phone and live without all this stuff?
Yeah.
Like what do you say to like the kid that's going to say that to you? And like, as a teacher, I see this in class. I see like, even kids that are involved in the drama all day long. I'm like, if you just put your phone away, the drama lives in your phone. It's not literally in front of you right now. But if you're talking to kids your own age, how do you say to them, like, your life exists outside of your phone?
Right. I think it's really hard to realize on your own, especially. I definitely had to have my parents, like I said, like with dance, like they were like, no, you're done. Like, we're not giving you any little extra leeway. Like, you're done. We're pulling you out mid-competition season. You're not even going to finish it out. Because if you finish out, then you're going to be like, oh, well, I'm better now. Like, I can do another season. And it's like you just get into that like cycle of just never ending like what you intend to end. And so I think you need some influence in your life, whether you need to reach out to a friend, whether that's your parents, more preferably an adult who kind of can like, be the smartness. But I think you just need someone to literally take your phone and hide it from you and say you can't have it, like you're done. Like, I think it's kind of like the whole cold turkey idea with people who are trying to like stop smoking. Like, if you take a little bit or even like something that's kind of like it, you're gonna fall back into the trap. Like, you just need to take it out of your life completely and just not have it in there. And I promise you, like, it'll be hard, but I promise that you will get through it, and it's not gonna be as bad as you think it is.
And it's hopefully the message from the kids that listen to this, the message is it's not coming from an adult. It's not coming from a teacher, an administrator, a parent. It's coming from a student.
Yeah.
And you had a unique chance to have something greatly impact your life. You've now worked through it, and now you're kind of being that advocate for people, being like, hey, like, it's okay to step away from these things and to kind of reset and to kind of reevaluate where you are. And it's a really important, strong message to kind of share. I don't want to talk all about this but I think it's kind of interesting because I think what you've talked about, it seems like now while you're here at the high school, you're getting now into like fitness club and wrestling. Yeah. And these are things that are very like discipline driven.
Right.
And it seems like from that experience, and your family as well, just kind of, it seems to me that like now you're getting yourself involved in these things. Like you can't be involved in fitness club if you're on your phone.
Right.
You can't you can't be in a wrestling match if you're on your phone. You don't get to be better in jiu-jitsu by, texting your friends.
Right.
So I think you're even finding like extracurricular activities that are absolutely requiring you to be present and even physically present to be successful.
Yeah, and I think I'm a true believer in that if you are mentally sad or mentally like just not okay, it will affect your physical health. Like I can't tell you how many times I went to my dad and be like, like I'm having such a bad week, I'm so upset, and of course I'm sick on top of it. And he's like, that's the connection. Like when your brain is like, sad, or your brain's like quote unquote sick, like your body like knows that, like your body's like sees that you're going through this, and it's like, okay, let's like take some heal time and like shut down. And so I'm a true believer that if you aren't physically going on walks or any exercise, I think will impact and help your mental health. And I think so if you're doing negative things, I think that will also bring your mental health down. So I think doing positive things, if working out works for you, great. If it doesn't, find something else positive. But I think physically doing positive things will give you a better positive mental health.
And it's interesting too, because you have going back to like kids that are on their phone all the time, they probably come home, they might go play different games where they're interacting with people. And again, they're just kind of being passive and not being active, like getting out there and kind of really getting involved in those things. So, we're coming up to the winter season here, wrestling. We don't have a female wrestling team here, but, there are definitely programs in the Lehigh Valley that do. So what is that like? And again, that's like putting yourself out there in a situation where you might be almost like a pioneer in a way. I think we've had some female wrestlers in the past, but like you're now going to be a pioneer in this sport where there's a growing amount of girls that are wrestling, but like not necessarily here at Emmaus. So does that give you like any sort of like fear about potentially going and thinking about doing something like that?
So I always get nervous. I mean, with anything I do, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, like when all this was going on, and I still have both of those. So I've definitely struggled with both, and I think that when it comes to getting nervous, I kind of just remind myself like you can do this. Like I'll be going into a match and I'll be like, yeah, this is intimidating. Yeah, you might lose, but like you're gonna have fun. Like and in my mind, like I get angry a lot. I mean, I think we all do, but like I definitely, like if I'm angry, I like cry, and I always am just like frustrated at something. And I think when I get on that mat and I'm like, about to like fight this other person, I'm just thinking to myself like, let all your anger out now. Like this is your moment to like get that all out of your system, all that negative energy, to like get it out. And it's a healthy way too, because you're being active. Obviously there's going to be a ref there, so no one's going to get hurt. And it's just a very, like, I see these kids, there's been plenty of fights this year, and I see these kids fighting it out, and I'm like, that's great and all, but you need to do it in a safer environment, and you need to do it in a safer way. And I think if you guys know what you're doing, especially in jiu-jitsu, if you know what you're doing, you can't really hurt each other. And if there's a ref, someone watching and observing, an adult, you can't hurt each other. And I think words can definitely hurt, and they're less easy to kind of control. So I think, I mean, not saying that you guys should go out and fight people, but like
we're not endorsing that, but
but like just if you are interested in wrestling, or if that's kind of like something that you enjoy, I think it's a very positive way of kind of getting your emotions out, but obviously we shouldn't be doing it in the school halls and without an adult and in a safe place.
It's just the whole story that you shared today is just so, thank you so much for like being open and honest and sharing that. And I think there's a lot of students that may be going through similar-ish type things, maybe not exactly your story, or maybe don't want to be, involved in the wrestling team, but so many students have that like story or have that thing. So as this will be like our last question here, like, for the student out there that was kind of where you were, or maybe where you were, like what suggestion do you have for them because you kind of were put in a spot where you had to take care of all of this stuff. You might not have wanted to, but it was kind of forced upon you.
Yeah.
So like if a student is listening to this and feels like maybe they are starting to realize that maybe they need to take care of this, what suggestions would you give them as a student to student? And hopefully it will make more of an impact coming from somebody that has gone through it and is, in their own peer group.
Yeah, I think your parents are a big part of it. I think if you are struggling with anything, even if you feel like it's not something you should talk with your parents about, it is. Like, your parents are your parents. Like, if something's going on in your life that's upsetting you or something's happening, you should tell your parents about it. They should be aware of it, because it may be uncomfortable when you first tell them. There's plenty of things that I don't want to tell my parents, but when I do, it's like a weight is lifted off my chest, and they kind of help me and they guide me through it, and that's what your parents are there for, to give you advice, because they lived through it, right? So, like, they're kind of trying to help you through all these situations and kind of prevent you from the mistakes they might have made as a child. So I think being open with your parents and having good communication between you guys is really important to just getting better. I also think, like, you need to be okay with yourself. Like, you need to, if you were put in a room by yourself for days on end, I mean, obviously people brought you food and water, but if you were by yourself, no phone, no nothing, like, you need to be okay with that. Like, if, we talk about that with body image, with everything. If you look in the mirror, you need to be okay with the way you look. If you, if you look in the mirror, let's say you're looking in the mirror, but let's take it in the mental health sort of way. You need to be okay with where you are at. And if you're not okay with yourself, that's the first thing that needs to change. And if you're not okay with yourself, then you have to work on that, because it's definitely important. Because if you're not okay with yourself, you can't really accomplish the healthy and positive things that you want to accomplish.
And it sounds like you're at a spot where you're happy with yourself.
Yes. I think I'm involved in a lot of fun stuff, and I'm helping people. People call me for advice, and I love giving advice, and I'm in a very good spot with my parents. And I just think, obviously I have flaws and there's stuff that I don't love about myself, but I think that overall you need to be okay. If everyone, if the whole world ended and it was just you, you need to be okay by yourself. Eventually your family is going to pass away. Eventually, it's just going to be you, and you need to be okay being on your own.
And, I really appreciate you sharing all the different tips and strategies and everything today. So for Aevidum, if people are interested in joining that, when does that meet?
Yeah. So it's pretty much every other week. We don't really have a specific date, because we just kind of started it, so we haven't established exactly when we're gonna do it. But if you're interested, Miss Williams runs it, so you could always go to her and join the Schoology group, and then you'll get all the information you need on the Schoology group. Or even if you know someone in Aevidum or you ask around, they will be able to help you with that as well. But I think if you are interested, you should definitely reach out to Miss Williams, which she's in the guidance office. So I think that would be pretty much the first step if you are interested in joining.
And then maybe we'll see you on the wrestling mat or running through the hallways or
Yes.
doing all that fun stuff.
Yes.
So we've done over 100 episodes of this, and we've talked to students about mental health stuff a little bit. But I have to admit, this conversation has probably been one of the most real conversations about stuff that has gone on. And for you to be able to share that, at this age and with this kind of level of clarity and maturity is awesome. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all this with, the people that are listening. And, hopefully we get a good turnout for people to listen to this, because your story is amazing, and the way that you shared it was really great. And hopefully, you get a chance to go to the middle school, and I'm sure they will be just as captive to the story as I have been today, because it's quite the story for a ninth grader to be able to share and share about overcoming these things and working towards it and how to be the best you. So Zoe, thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you taking the time. If you ever want to come back on in the future, or you need to hype up anything else, or maybe when you're going for, a wrestling championship this year or a jiu-jitsu belt or whatever you get, maybe we'll have to have you back on again.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.